Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Cheryl Pemberton. I'm with the Mid-Continent Public Library, and I'm glad you could join us tonight. And I think we have a lot of virtual program supporters in the room tonight. I do want to ask just a couple of things. If you could keep your mic muted throughout the program. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll answer them as time allows at the end of the program. And then, as always, we have a survey. We'd like to get your feedback on our virtual programming efforts. And so I will put that link to the survey in chat at the beginning of the program and then again towards the end of the program. So tonight's program, Bats, Essential to Our Ecosystems, is being brought to us by Jada Tressler of the Missouri Department of Conservation. Thank you for joining us tonight, Jada.
All right, excellent. Well, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for that introduction. Like Cheryl said, my name is Jada Tressler. I am a naturalist with the Missouri Department of Conservation, and my job is a little bit of jack of all trades, master of none. So in the naturalist world, that is taking education and making people have a connection to the resource that I'm trying to teach them about. So with today being October, in the month of October, and we're approaching Halloween, bats is a very appropriate topic for our program today. And I have a presentation that I'm going to share with you all. And then Cheryl and I talked about this at the beginning before we started. If anybody has questions, please put them in the chat. And at the end of my presentation, I will do my best to answer your questions and get any information that I may have missed or is not clear cleared up once we are started. So if everyone is ready, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Bring it over here. Whoop. There we go. How's that? How's that look? Good. Awesome. All right. Okay, so our little insignia down here in the bottom right-hand corner, is our what we call our MDC triangle, the Missouri Department of Conservation. And the department is really just a team of folks that have come together in the like-minded mindset of conservation, using things in a smart way. And bats are just one of those resources that we need to protect. And it's hard to protect what you don't know about, and especially what you might think is kind of spooky. So I'm here to kind of clear up any misconceptions or fears and worries that we have about bats and get you some firsthand knowledge of what I have encountered with my work as a naturalist, with somebody who has a wildlife ecology and conservation background. So that way you can kind of understand a little bit more of these creatures that we share an ecosystem with. So I like to say my alternate title is It's Not a Bird, Bug, or a Flying Rat. What is a bat? And this picture right here is a good friend of mine and a coworker. This is Jordan Meyer. He used to be the bat ecologist for the entire state of Missouri throughout for the Department of Conservation. And now he is a policy coordinator who is helping to ensure that policies are written in the best interest of the state and the resources that we are protecting. And right here, he has stretched out the wing of a bat. You can see its little foot right down here, and he is looking for evidence that this bat may have been affected with white nose syndrome, which is something else we will discuss towards the end of this presentation. So in Missouri, we have 14 species of bats in Missouri. The most common is the little brown bat, which is this guy right here. By comparison, we do have the big brown bat, which has about an inch to an inch and a half in length on the little brown bat, but is not actually our biggest bat. We have some that are slightly larger, up to about 5 or so inches long from the tip of their nose down to their tail. This is the hoary bat. And then we also have some that have really distinct characteristics called the long-eared bats. This is one that we have right here, typically down in the Ozarks. But this is just an idea to show you all the variation that we see in our species of bats. But they do all share a few more similarities. So the little brown bat, typically whenever I do introductions for bat programming, I like to use the little brown bat as my standard for um, the bats that I kind of talk about as in general in Missouri. So for this little guy, they typically average about 3 inches long. And when you measure animals in the wild, your measurements always begin at the tip of their nose down to their rear. Sometimes it includes the tail, sometimes it does not. So this is typically length that does not include the tail, and we'll see more of um, a stretched out body of a bat, so you can kind of see how that all spans out. Their weight, super duper duper light, only about 1/4 of an ounce. And in the mammalian world, which is what this group of animals is part of, we do actually tell different species apart by dentition, which would be their teeth. So looking in the top part of the skull right here, you can actually see that this bat has teeth that vary in shape and size based on where it is in their mouth. So towards the back, we do have flat molars that are kind of arranged in an M or a W shape. Up here at the front, we do have incisors and canines used to help them effectively capture their food. A little bit of Latin language lesson for you. Myotis is the genus, and the species name is Lucifugus. And for those translations, that translates from mouse ear and light fleer. So this guy, we know bats are typically nocturnal. They spend most of their time out during the nighttime. And whenever biologists have been working towards finding names that fit these creatures, one of the features that really stuck out to them were these little ears. They likened them to mouse ears. And then lucifugus has to do with their behavior, meaning they're nocturnal. They don't want to be around the light. So little brown bat, most common one that I will refer to for bats in general, and also probably most likely to be the bat that you are viewing whenever you go outside in the summertime and look up at the sky. So right off the bat, haha, we are going to dispel some common myths that I hear whenever I talk about bats. So a lot of times folks are very concerned about any sort of interaction that they may have with wildlife, especially if it is unwanted, and people are worried that they're going to get caught in my hair. So bats do not seek out humans. We are not part of their diet. All bats in Missouri eat bugs. They're all insectivores. So if a bat is flying down close to where you're sitting, let's say in your backyard on your patio, it's a warm summer night, and you feel as though the bats are swooping very close to your head, they are probably going after an insect that is also buzzing close to your head, such as a mosquito. So more than likely, if a bat is coming that close to you, they have a reason other than you to get very close. They are not interested in us as food. They are not vampire bats. They are looking for bugs, probably a mosquito. And with that, they might say, well, these bats are blind. They're going to crash into me. And we have found out that bats are actually not completely blind, although they do experience some levels of color blindness. They are not completely blind. Their vision is fairly decent, although they do rely on other senses in order to get them through the dusk and the nighttime hours without crashing into things. So not necessarily blind as a bat. And then the last myth is kind of 50-50. A lot of people are concerned bats transmit rabies, and this is a valid concern. It is a possibility, but based off of the research that MDC has amassed over the years, bats do transmit rabies, but less than 1% of bats in our state carry rabies. So it is possible that if you have a run-in with a bat, the bat bites you, and there is a transfer of the bat saliva into past your skin barrier. It is possible that if that bat has rabies, you could contract it. And obviously, if there's any concern that you think that you've been exposed to the rabies virus through a bat or any other wildlife encounter, you should seek medical care quickly. However, I don't want anybody to avoid certain outdoor spaces because there might be a bat, you might have a run-in with a bat, and that would guarantee that you would get rabies. That's just not likely to happen. So I don't want that concern to stop you from enjoying the outdoors. And then finally, bats are not rodents. So a lot of times people will acknowledge bats as part of a wild animal in our ecosystem, but they aren't quite sure where to place them. When you look up close, these guys are covered with soft, fuzzy fur. So they are mammals. They can fly. They're the only mammals with true flight, but they are not birds. They do not have feathers. And there are a few other differences when it comes to birds and bats, but they're not rodents either. Rodents being in the mammal family, bats are not rodents. They're in their own group on their own. They are in a group called the Chiropterans, which translates from Latin to winged hand. So being the only mammal with true flight, they're very different from a bird. They do not use the same bones to support their wings as a bird does. So looking up here at this top picture, you're going to notice some bones that have been labeled. You may recognize some of them. Probably the most easily recognizable would be the humerus bone. So on humans, that would be where your funny bone connects in your elbow, and your humerus bone connects to these two smaller bones up in your forearm, the radius and the ulna. And from there, it goes into your carpals and your metacarpals, which extend as our finger bones. Okay, so keeping this in mind, let's drop down here to the bat diagram. We see the humerus that connects to a bone called the radius. Here, the radius and the ulna it's just one instead of two. So the radius connects to the humerus. But the real difference is in these carpals. So when you look at these carpals, 1, 2, 3, and 4, they extend all the way to the edge of the wing, whereas the carpals and metacarpals on the bird end right here about the middle of the top of the wing. So whenever you take into consideration that this creature has been named the winged hand animal, they're actually using their hands to fly through the sky. This is a very thin membrane of skin in between their carpals, and they use that not only to fly, but also to help them catch their prey, which again is going to be insects. Okay, so not rodents, they're their own group. They are mammals. They're not a bird, not a bug. They are a mammalian creature with true flight. True flight means that they can go up and down, back and forward, and side to side. If we think about like a flying squirrel, they don't actually fly. They only have the ability to glide down. So flying squirrels do not have true flight. They can just start at a really high area, stretch out their wing or their skin membranes, and float down from one higher space to a lower space. So keep that in mind when thinking about other creatures that appear to fly. This is another comparison where I kind of like how I was talking about with our arm and hand bones. So here it is color coded for us. And you can see the phalanges is an extra level that they go into from the first one. The phalanges would be these bones all the way down here at the edge. And for us, they would be more of our finger bones at the end of our fingertips. And you can see how it's the same bones, just arranged totally different, which allows us to categorize these warm-blooded creatures into different groups. Okay, so we've talked a little bit already about their dietary habits. In Missouri, all of our bats are insectivores, and in order to eat and drink effectively, they do so what we consider on the fly. So they don't stop and eat. They don't stop and take a drink. Most of the time, they're going to be moving constantly, swooping down on their prey, grabbing a bug out of the air, flying over the surface of the water like this bat is doing down here in this picture. They're extending their tongue, they're slurping up some water, and then they're going to continue on their flight through the night. Now, these guys are incredibly effective at gathering their insect prey. They can eat up to 1,000 mosquitoes in an hour. And typically, a bat is going to eat about half their body weight in one night, which, considering that our little brown bat only weighs about a quarter of an ounce, doesn't seem like much. But when you multiply that across the entire population of bats in the state of Missouri, they create a huge impact on the predation levels of our insects that we see flying around at night. So I'm going to play this little video for y'all, and I want you all to notice how the bat utilizes their wings and their tail to bring their prey into their mouths as they are flying. So let me bring this up. So here we have a bat seeking prey. There's a moth. Shoo, grabbed it. They're incredibly effective hunters. Using their senses to be able to grab their prey right out of the air and fill up their bellies. So there's a little up close picture of our little bat friend. There he goes. Almost like he wraps it up in a hug before he eats it. All right. So that's one of my favorite videos. Okay, so when it comes to sensing their surroundings, they use echolocation, which is a format of high frequency sound that is emitted from the bat's voice box, and they use those ears to help them catch the vibrations and the sound waves bouncing back at them after it hits whatever is around the bat. So if a bat is flying through the forest and they are constantly emitting their echolocation sounds, they're also listening for the reflected wave of the trees, the branches, maybe a rock formation, and eventually they're going to be able to notice something that is different than those trees. And that's going to be their prey item that they're looking for. So they can make about 200 pulses of these sounds per second. And the cool thing is, in order to make sure that they don't get their wires crossed with what sounds they're making and what is bouncing back to them, the bat will actually use a specialized structure inside their ear to close their eardrums while they make the sound, and then open their ears back up so they can listen for the reflected sound back to their ears, which is pretty incredible when you stop and think about it. It's something that happens super, super quick, especially if they are releasing about 200 pulses of sound per second. These ultrasonic sounds, we don't hear them. We would have to have a special recording device that could bring the frequency down within our range. But bats do also release sounds that can be heard by humans without the need for amplification or any manipulation of a recording. They'll make little squeaks and chatters depending on what it is they're doing or if they're trying to talk to the other bats in the area. Now, there was one summer that I was actually fortunate enough to work with Jordan, the guy from the very first picture on my intro slide. This was before he and I were out of college. We were both volunteering and interning at the Luss Bluffs National Wildlife Refuge up in Mound City, Missouri. And they had a bunch of projects going on that summer, and they needed help with one of them, and it was setting up bat detection boxes. And Jordan and I had a whole list of locations that we had to drive around on the wildlife refuge, put these bat boxes up, and leave them there for an extended period of time so they could record data at night of bats flying through the area. So this box right here, we could pop the panel off, and inside there were several different little memory cards. And then this little exterior part was a microphone. So we would put this box up on a little tower or a little pole. We would leave it where it was supposed to be, turn it on, tell it to start recording at sundown, tell it to stop recording at sun up. And then a week later or so, we would go back out and we would grab all of those boxes. We would take the little cards, the little memory cards, bring them back to the office. And we were actually able to hand them over to the biologist who would upload the data from all of those sound clips. And he had programming that would take the different bat recordings and tell us which species of bat were flying by the bat boxes. And we could record how many different species. We couldn't necessarily record how many individuals that we were hearing, especially if it was not very clear if it was just the same bat over and over, or if it was multiple flying by throughout the night, but we could at least tell how many different species we were finding based on this auditory sampling. So that was my little introduction to bats and how fascinating they are and what measures we're doing to keep track of them. And we'll talk a little bit more about, again, why it's so important that we pay attention to our bat populations. So bats do hibernate. When the bugs disappear, bats hibernate instead of finding something else to eat. You might notice that there are creatures out there who, again, are just not very picky. They'll find whatever they can chow down on and they'll go for it. Bats, not so much. They're very dependent on insects, and when the insects are gone, the bats know it's time for them to hibernate or move on. So whenever they find a hibernaculum, their body temperature are going to drop from around 100 degrees all the way down to 40 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember, these are mammals, so they are able to regulate their body temperatures. But whenever their body temperatures are operating at 100 degrees, it takes a lot more energy to maintain that. If you don't have anything going in, you cannot maintain your body metabolism at 100 degrees. You have to bring it down to that 40 to 60 range to where it really does not require much energy to maintain a hibernative state. Their heart rate slows from about 1,000 beats per minute to 1 beat every 4 to 5 seconds. So their heart rate slows down, their body temperature cools, and they'll do this from anywhere from 5 to 6 months. In Missouri, we will see bats hibernating in caves. We might also see them going to some trees. And then actually some bats will even roost like in the forest floor in the leaf litter. But this is a typical image of what you might see if you were doing research on a bat hibernaculum where there was a high density of bats. They will cluster together on the ceiling of a cave, and they'll pack in nice and tight so that way they can, excuse me, they can share their body heat. And then that also helps maintain that lowered body temp without expending much energy. And they'll pack in nice and tightly, and they'll stay there until the bugs return and they have a constant food source. It is also possible that they will hibernate up underneath tree bark. So this is an image that's taken where someone is looking from the base of a tree up. So this is the tree trunk, and this is the tree bark, and there's a little bat nestled right there in between. Typically, bats are going to always go where there's edge habitat, which means there's trees on one side, and then it is really close to an open field. And if it can be near a stream or any sort of constant water source, that is an added bonus, as it is with any animal. But especially for bats, as they eat a lot of insects that spend part of their life cycle in the water, they know that the water is going to be there to provide not only hydration, but also food eventually. And then again, hibernating locations are caves and old abandoned mines that people have utilized over the years. So if you're near any of these areas and you're thinking, oh, I've seen that sort of habitat near me, it's very possible that you have a bat population near you as well. The little brown bat, the ones that we're most commonly seeing around us, they're going to be nesting in tree cavities that were made by something else or simply from a tree that has fallen apart, suffered some damage. But we will also see them nesting in houses and barns and chimneys from time to time. So bats are fairly opportunistic. If they can find a place to nest or roost, they will. And with that, sometimes we see them in our homes. And one question that folks ask me a lot is about bat houses and how effective they are and if they should put one up at their house. And oops, sorry. So bat houses are an option that you can put if you notice that you have bats in an area that you don't necessarily want them to roost in, such as your house, but you want them in the area. So if you can put them at least 20 feet high on the eastern side of a building where they receive some daylight, but they're not just going to get all unfiltered sunlight, that would probably be your best bet for a bat house to actually be successful. Bat houses do not have a flat bottom that's enclosed. This part is actually open, so our bats can fly underneath the bottom and then crawl upwards. So again, this bottom left picture, these bats, someone is looking up from the bottom of the bat house, looking into it, where these bats have climbed in and made their home. This particular bat house right here on the eave of this house, this one was taken from a homeowner in Michigan who was actually able to encourage about 200 bats to get out of the barn and the house that she was residing in on her property and actually take up residence in these bat houses. Now, that's not always typical. I'm not going to say it's a surefire way to get bats to move out of your home or to get just to attract bats to the area in general. Most of the time, they're going to look for trees that provide roosting areas. They want that open field space, and then they also want to be near water. So it's a little more difficult to attract bats to an area. But there are certain things you can do, bat houses being one of them, which will potentially help encourage them to come to your house. So again, this is just looking up. Bat houses don't have a bottom on them. They are allow the bats to fly right up underneath, and then that's where they can take up residence inside the bat house. If you go to the Missouri Department of Conservation website and just type in bat houses in our search box, there are actually bat house directions for how to build your own. So that is something that you guys can look up and download on your own if you are so inclined for a new project this fall or winter. So, with bats, I always like to take a moment and talk a little bit about how we have more bats every year. So, as far as reproduction for our bats go, it's very interesting. When I was doing my research, I learned a lot, and it was very new to me. I had no idea. So, bats are very promiscuous. They do not just pick one partner and practice monogamy. They are very promiscuous with their behavior. So, in my research, I found the words aggressive and non-discriminate when it comes to their mating, which I thought was kind of a very clear term as far as describing how their reproductive habits are. So, they will begin their mating season in the fall. Mating takes place before hibernation, and the baby pups are born in May or June. So gestation is only about 2 months. And right away, you guys should kind of start be thinking like, okay, let's do some math here. If these bats are mating in the fall, before they go into hibernation, babies are born in May, but gestation is only 2 months. Our timing is way off here. And that's because bats do this really fascinating process within their reproductive habits called delayed fertilization. So the males will breed with a female, but the male or the female will not release an egg until she's ready for it to be fertilized, meaning she is not going to expend her precious stored energy for growing an embryo and a fetus. She's going to use it to help maintain her body through hibernating through that winter. She knows that if she were to start growing a pup inside of her uterus, it would not have the resources that she would need to get it through the entire gestation period, as well as keep her alive through hibernation. So she's going to wait. Once the food supply returns in abundance, meaning the insect have begun emerging, then the egg is released to meet with the sperm and begin developing. So baby bats are called pups. If you ever find one by itself, they are not very cute. They look like this, which is slightly horrifying. But again, in the spirit of spooky season and almost Halloween, I think this is appropriate. The female will hold the pup on her chest while she is roosting in the cave or in a tree cavity or a tree roost. She will hold the pup on her chest. She does produce milk for her babies, but whenever she needs to go out and forage for insects, she will leave the baby hanging in the roost space, and they will be able to find their baby based off of smell. So this insect right here, or this baby pup, this bat pup is one that's very clearly on the side of some bricks. So it's possible that it fell out of a roof eave, or was nearby some trees and it fell onto the side of the house and is waiting for mom to come back and take care of it. Okay, so as far as what threats these bats face, they do have some natural predators out there in our ecosystem. Owls and other birds of prey, cats, snakes, and rats will actually all go after a bat if they can catch one. Pesticides also have a fairly large impact on our bats as well, because it removes the food source. If you are spraying insecticide or pesticides like broad spectrum across your yard to get rid of any and all bugs that visit your lawn, unfortunately, not only does it remove the food source, but it can also contaminate future hatchings that may feed the bats, and it can cause problems for bats down the line. And then with any living thing on planet Earth, habitat loss is the #1 cause for endangered status with our bats. And we do have several bats in Missouri that do have endangered status, if not all of them. So it is something that we are monitoring as an agency, both statewide and federally, something to definitely be aware of. So with the bats that we have in Missouri, I did just want to showcase a couple more species that you might see. The little brown bat, of course, has brown fur and is little, but we do have one bat in Missouri that has black fur, and that's the silver-haired bat. And this bat was actually outside of the downtown Kansas City Public Library branch last fall when I did this presentation for another library branch just a year ago. So this little bat, he was a little late to the game. He probably should have been hibernating at this point, but unfortunately, he was just hanging out on a windowsill at the library. These guys typically live in trees, but obviously are adapted to live in urban settings like this guy. Typically, they're going to be eating beetles, and believe it or not, they can actually swim through water for short periods of time if needed. It has been documented that these guys have swam a little bit. We do have one bat that is red, absolutely gorgeous. This is the eastern red bat. Whoops, excuse me. And they typically, we would see them between May and September. So they have already begun hibernating. They will fly south to warmer climes, but sometimes they will actually roost in the leaf litter down on the forest floor and hibernate there in the southern parts of Missouri. These bats will typically have 1 to 4 babies every year. Most bat species are only going to have 1 pup, but these guys can have up to 4, which is not what you normally see whenever you're looking at the bat populations. And then this one is our largest bat in Missouri. This is the hoary bat. They can get up to almost 6 inches long. And we typically find them way up high in the trees, about 17 feet above the ground. We don't these are not considered prominent in their range. Oh, sorry. No, they are not considered prominent in their range, even though they are found in all lower 48 states, and in over half of Canada. It's just not likely that you are going to see them. However, they have been documented all over history, during history in these 48 states. So they weigh about as much as a slice of bread, which doesn't seem like much, but again, in the in the bat world, they are quite considerable size for our insectivores. Okay, so one of the main threats that you probably have associated with bats, besides habitat loss and other predation, other predators taking the bats out of the population, is something called white nose syndrome. This is a fungus that grows on the faces and wings of hibernating bats. And whenever this fungus begins to grow around their face, especially around their nostrils, it interrupts the hibernation. And instead of being able to go right back to sleep, the bat has woken up, their heart rate starts to climb, their body temperature starts to raise, and they think, if I'm going to be this active, I need to go out and find food. And because of that, they start to burn through their fat stores, flying through the winter woods looking for food, and there is none. So, unfortunately, dehydrated, starved, they're usually not going to survive once they wake up, unless they're able to go find insects or get back into that hibernative state before, before they burn through all of their fat stores. So this is what it looks like up close. This is a little brown bat that has the white nose syndrome infecting it. It is a fungus. And this fungus occurs naturally on cave walls. It's very prominent in European countries. And actually, bats in European countries, they don't have a problem with this. They have evolved alongside of the fungus, and they are resistant to it to a point where it doesn't decimate their bat populations like it has in the United States. This is something that we've seen cause a lot of problems, to the point where we've had to close many, many, many caves to visitors in order to stop the spread of this fungus from getting in other places and affecting our bat populations. Not only does it cover their faces, but it also will scar their wings. So in that very first picture on my introduction slide, you saw Jordan holding up an outstretched wing of a bat, and he was looking for these little white spots that were scars, indicating that this bat did have the fungus growing on its body at one point. Now, it's possible that that fungus is still active. It's also possible that the bat is able to move past it and the fungus is not causing any problems. Not, regardless, it is present, or it was at one time, and it is very clearly shown here in these little tiny white spots that we see. As of March 31st, 2016, this is what our research was showing us as far as where white nose syndrome was affecting our bat population. So the darker colors, black, red, brown, orange, those were years 2006. The orange colors brings us up to 2013. And then these teal and purple colors, that's going to be 2014 to 2016. When I first made this presentation, this was the most accurate information that I had. And you can notice that it only extended in one area as far as the western coast as of 2016. But when I updated this presentation 2 years ago, this was more of the spread of what we've got. So we've definitely got it on the West Coast now. It is more prevalent in the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming. We see that it has extended north of Missouri. We've got it in Canada, pretty much across the entire lower portion of Canada, east to west. So unfortunately, it is spreading, and we are trying to keep track of it. Now, things that we can do as far as, excuse me, as far as mitigating this is following the regulations when it comes to caving. So the best thing that people can do to prevent the spread is pay attention to when it says caves are closed. Don't enter it if it's been closed for any reason. Don't take shoes that have gone from one cave to another cave without thoroughly disinfecting them. Whenever I went to a cave with Jordan 2 years ago, we actually sprayed all of our equipment with a solution that was almost entirely isopropyl alcohol in order to try to kill any of the fungal spores that may have been on our equipment while we were down in that cave. So it is very important to follow those rules. They're not there to ruin fun. They're there to help protect our resource for future generations. So something else that I was able to participate in was going down to Coffin Cave, which is down in the southern central part of Missouri. And this is the largest hibernaculum in Missouri for bats. So looking down here is a cave that drops straight down about 20, 25 feet. And coming out of it was hundreds and hundreds of bats. So hopefully, let's see. Don't need the sound. We don't need the sound on. So this is at dusk. The bats are just flying out like crazy. They are emerging. They're flying straight up into the sky. They're getting ready to go out and begin their foraging for insects that night. Another cool video that I took that night was a infrared camera that was pointed down in that little hole right there. So that, let me pause this. So that right there is where the cave extends down further into the ground to where the infrared camera can't see it. And again, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands of bats are emerging through this hibernaculum opening. And I was fortunate enough to get to see it up close. It was very, very cool. There was a research project going on collecting various amounts of data. So we were actually able to have bats up close. Those are not my hands, but I did get to take that picture. So we had a little brown bat. He was very grumpy with us that we were taking some data, measuring him, looking at his wings for any evidence of the white nose syndrome. This one doesn't appear to have any on it. But once we checked for white nose syndrome evidence, we weighed them, tried to figure out what species they were, if it was a male or a female, and took a few swabs from inside their mouths to see if they had any of the fungal spores present. Another time I did get to go to up north by Excelsior Springs. And again, I was with Jordan, and this is when he was the bat ecologist. And he said, okay, Jada, I need your help. We're going to go into this cave and we need to look for some bats. And I said, great, sign me up. Where's the cave? And he's like, okay, this is where it is. We need to go down. And I said, we need to go down where? And he said, we need to go down there. So he sent us down into this cave. And at first I was a little nervous. I didn't really know exactly what I was getting into, but this cave was actually an abandoned mine. And when we walked in, it had all of these passageways that had been cleared during the mining process at this location. This area is not open to the public. It is protected because they are hoping to keep it as a safe place for hibernating bats. And fortunately, I earned my keep on that excursion. I did find 3 bats, 3 little brown bats. They were the only ones that we saw after a couple of hours of walking through the cave. And I was fortunate enough to be the one to spot them. So they were hibernating. We tried not to disturb them, but it was very cool to see them up close. And then we did the best that we could. We crouched down. You can see here, full-grown man. He's having to crouch down pretty far. And safety first, I had my helmet on, and I managed to get out of there without falling and without leaving anything behind. So that was a pretty cool experience that I've got to be a part of. So to wrap it all up, bats are important from a myriad of different aspects. So we have bats that live in other parts of the world that are amazing at seed dispersal. This is a flying fox bat. You might recognize it from the storybook Stella Luna. It's a fruit-eating bat. Inside fruit, there are seeds, and those seeds need to get planted somehow. And what better way to get spread all over an area than through the droppings of bats, which we also know is an incredibly nutrient-rich fertilizer. Bats are also pollinators. So this is a bat. I forget exactly what species it is. It lives in the southwestern United States, and it actually pollinates the agave plant, which is what the plant we use to make tequila from. If we didn't have bats pollinating those flowers, we would not be able to have tequila for margaritas. So a very interesting aspect of our furry little mammals. And then in Missouri, a bat will actually provide considerable help to farmers in the form of pest control. So this long-eared bat is eating a grasshopper that potentially could have decimated a crop field, and instead it fed the bat, which provides a beautiful source of nutrients back into the soil as its guano hits the ground. And it just kind of completes that life cycle, keeping those nutrients within the ecosystem, keeping everything healthy and supported. So this is a pile of the guano. Within this pile of bat droppings, there are dozens and dozens of species that survive on it. So anything from fungal spores that are beneficial to an ecosystem, different bacteria, and other cave creatures rely on this as a food source within their lifetime. All right, and with that, we are at 7:16. Any questions for me?
We have one already.
Awesome.
As you mentioned, that bats mate in the fall and practice delayed gestation. Why biologically do they not just wait until the spring to mate?
So it has something to do with their habits. So if they were waiting until the spring to mate, they would have to spend a lot of their energy finding a mate in the springtime, which can be an energy depleter. They would have to be growing the fetus during the spring, as well as getting ready to migrate in the fall with that baby. So the timing just works out better with their life habits as far as how they survive in the wintertime and in the summertime.
Okay, we did have a question about the recording. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and I will email everyone once it is available. It might take a day or two. Okay, and next, can bats with white nose fungus be treated? And do bats have poor vision?
So I don't believe there's any treatment that we have for them, unfortunately. As the evidence suggests for the European bat species, this is something that has existed between the two living organisms. The fungus and the bats have been existing like this for many, many generations. There is no treatment that we know of, nor would we be able to apply it to the number of bats that are infected with it. So it's really just a matter of we don't know if they're going to survive or not. Either they will or they won't. And prevention is the best cure that we have for them right now. And then as far as their eyesight goes, they have some levels of color blindness. However, they are able to see their surroundings. They aren't completely blind.
Okay, why do they hang upside down?
That actually has to do with their flight. It's a lot easier for them to begin their flight if they drop from their roost and then they begin to fly up or down or sideways. And then the hanging upside down is just the way that their feet are. Their hands are not made for grabbing, their hands are made for flying. So those feet are how they secure themselves to their roosts.
Okay, just curious about the grooming.
About the grooming.
She's wondering, how do they groom?
Oh, they're able to groom like you would see another mammal doing it. They can use typically their mouths to keep themselves clean. They're very flexible. They have a very delicate little skeleton, but they are able to keep themselves clean just like any other mammal.
Okay. Are the bats radius and ulna fused?
I don't know if it's fused or if it's just the radius. I would have to double check that. But there is no ulna for sure.
Mhm. Are you looking it up, or do you have time? Are you ready for another question?
Yes, I'm ready for another question. Go
Okay.
right ahead.
Okay. If you had bats in your house, what is the best way to safely remove them?
So if you have bats in your house, call a professional. Don't try to get them out by yourself. Call somebody who has experience getting these bats out of the house and keeping them from coming back. Typically, what they're going to do is they're going to observe where the bats are getting in and out. They're going to wait for dusk, and then they're going to go to that spot where those bats are coming out, and they're going to patch up that space as best as they possibly can. Bats are protected in Missouri. You cannot kill them because they are most of them, almost all of our 14 species are endangered to some level. So unfortunately, you cannot kill them or do any sort of eradication like lethally. You would need to prevent them from getting back into your house by securing those openings.
Okay. Do the ultrasonic repellents work to clear areas such as an attic?
And that's actually what I was getting ready to look up because I somebody had asked me this one time, and I have heard them working. I don't know how effective they are. Um, they definitely hear it. They have great hearing, obviously. I would definitely want to talk to people who have used these firsthand, and just verify that they've actually seen positive results. I have not personally used them or tried them, and I'm not 100% sure if that's the most effective way.
Okay. Do bats that eat bugs also drink nectar?
In Missouri, ours only eat bugs. I think that one that we saw in the next to last slide, I believe its mouth parts are shaped more to just drink nectar with that long tongue rather than those super sharp teeth. Typically, they have a pretty specialized diet. So usually they're just going to go with one or the other.
Okay, I think. Oh, okay. Here's one I missed. As a conservationist, if you find a bat with white nose syndrome, what do you do if there is no cure?
Um, it depends. I don't know exactly what the protocol is currently. Like I said, my friend Jordan, he was kind of my go-to. He's not doing any frontline bat ecology work right now. Um, from the conservation standpoint, if the fungus is found in a cave, the main priority is just keeping it from spreading any further. So that's keeping traffic out of the caves. If we found a bat, I don't know exactly what they're doing. It's possible that they might keep the specimen for research or for studies, or it's possible that they might leave it in the cave to see if there is some sort of adaptation that may come out of that bat. If it survives, it may have a gene that is resistant to the fungus, and that gene may get passed on in future generations. I don't know exactly what their protocol is right now. I think it really just depends on what the research is showing us and what direction we want to go with our bat populations.
Okay, I think we're at the end of the questions in chat. I did, for those of you who weren't looking at the chat, I've included Jada's email address at the Department of Conservation. So if you think of a question later, you can you can email your question, and I will include that in the email once the video gets uploaded to YouTube. Okay, super interesting talk. Thank you so much. Okay, nice. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Let's see. Okay. This might be the end of our questions then. I want to thank you for covering this program tonight. It was very interesting, even though I'm not a huge bat fan. But they are interesting creatures. So I want to thank you all for joining us this evening, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much, Jada.
Yes, thank you all. I've
Um,
got to go and work on my son's Halloween costume. He wants to be a vampire bat, so that's the rest of my
oh,
evening plans.
oh, that's so cute.
Yes,
Okay. Good night.
wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.